The dense forest was bathed in the golden light of dawn, its towering pines casting long, shifting shadows across the leaf-strewn ground. A crisp wind rustled through the branches, carrying with it the rich scent of damp earth and moss. Birds had begun their morning chorus, their calls mingling with the distant babbling of a hidden brook. Ranger Ethan Walker adjusted the straps of his backpack and exhaled deeply, his breath forming a thin mist in the cool air. This was his territory, a vast, protected woodland spanning hundreds of acres, where he monitored wildlife, checked for illegal poaching activity, and ensured the forest remained a sanctuary for the creatures that called it home. He had been patrolling these woods for years, knew every trail and every hidden path. But despite his familiarity with the land, he was always prepared for the unexpected. As he stepped over a fallen log, something in the distance made him pause. A low, guttural sound, painful, restrained. His senses sharpened. He followed the noise, weaving between trees, boots pressing into soft, damp earth. The sound grew louder, more distinct. A growl, a snarl laced with distress. His pulse quickened. He rounded a bend and then he saw it. A wolf. The animal was trapped, its front paw caught in the jagged metal teeth of a snare, half hidden beneath the fallen leaves. The wolf's fur was a striking mixture of ash gray and silver, thick and matted with dirt. Its golden eyes burned with a mix of fear and defiance, muscles tense, ears flattened against its head. It tried to move, but the trap bit deeper into its leg, drawing fresh blood. Ethan's stomach twisted in anger. Illegal traps were a rare but persistent problem in these woods. Poachers set them for game, sometimes targeting wolves, sometimes catching them by accident. The sight of the suffering animal sent a wave of determination through him. Carefully, he knelt a few yards away, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He knew enough about wolves to understand that any sudden action could trigger its survival instincts. It would see him as a threat, and a wolf, even one weakened by injury, was still a powerful predator. "Easy there, buddy," he murmured, keeping his voice steady. "I'm here to help." The wolf growled low in its throat, its body coiled like a spring. It tested the trap again, wincing as pain shot through its leg. Ethan could see the strain in its eyes, the fight between instinct and exhaustion. Time was critical. The longer the wolf remained in the trap, the greater the risk of permanent injury or attracting other predators. Ethan reached slowly into his pack and pulled out a thick, folded cloth and a length of rope. He had dealt with injured animals before, but this was different. This was a wild wolf, and he was about to get close enough to free it. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. The wolf's ears twitched at the sound, eyes narrowing as it followed his every movement. He had to act quickly but carefully. The cloth would serve as a makeshift blindfold. If he could get close enough to cover the wolf's eyes, it might reduce its panic. The rope was for safety, in case he needed to secure the animal. Ethan edged closer, his boots barely making a sound on the damp ground. The wolf let out a warning growl, snapping its jaws, but he didn't back away. Instead, he crouched lower, extending the cloth toward the wolf's face. It recoiled, trembling with both pain and fury. I know. This isn't what you want," he said softly. "But if I don't help you, no one else will." The wolf's breathing was ragged, nostrils flaring. Blood from its wounded paw had begun to pool beneath it, staining the brown leaves dark red. The sight fueled Ethan's urgency. He lunged forward in one swift motion, draping the cloth over the wolf's head. The animal jerked violently, its body convulsing with instinctual resistance, but Ethan held firm. With the wolf temporarily blinded, he turned his attention to the trap. His fingers found the mechanism, prying at the rusted metal. The trap had been set deep, its springs strong. He gritted his teeth and forced it open, just enough for the wolf to pull its leg free. The animal yelped, staggering backward as soon as its paw was released. It tore the cloth from its head with a furious shake, but instead of attacking, it collapsed onto its side, panting heavily. The injury was severe. If it didn't get help, infection would set in. Ethan had a decision to make. He could leave the wolf here and let nature take its course, or he could take a risk and try to help it further. And he already knew what his choice would be. He moved cautiously, retrieving a small first aid kit from his bag. The wolf eyed him warily but didn't move as he approached again. Its strength was waning, and despite its instincts, it seemed to understand that Ethan was not its enemy. "Let's get you patched up, big guy. Then we'll figure out what happens next." Ethan knew he couldn't leave the wolf here. He had done the first part, freeing it from the trap. But without treatment, the animal wouldn't survive long. Infection would set in, weakening it further. Reluctantly, he made a decision that was just as risky as freeing the wolf had been. He would take it back to his cabin. With careful movements, he pulled out a collapsible stretcher from his pack. It was lightweight but sturdy, something he carried for emergencies. He laid it out on the forest floor, glancing toward the wolf. The animal was exhausted, barely holding itself up. "All right, buddy," Ethan murmured. "Let's get you somewhere safe." He didn't expect the wolf to cooperate, but to his surprise, it didn't resist as he carefully maneuvered it onto the stretcher. Perhaps it understood that he meant no harm. Perhaps it was simply too weak to fight. Either way, Ethan was grateful. Securing the straps, he hoisted the stretcher up and began the trek back to his cabin. The journey was slow and arduous. The weight of the wolf combined with the rough terrain made every step a challenge. Ethan's muscles ached, but he pushed forward, determined. Birds fluttered overhead, and in the distance, a deer darted through the undergrowth. The forest was alive, oblivious to the small act of compassion unfolding within it. By the time Ethan reached the clearing where his cabin stood, his breath was heavy, and sweat dampened his collar. His cabin, a modest wooden structure, sat nestled between towering trees. He set the stretcher down gently and unfastened the straps. The wolf stirred, opening its golden eyes to look at him. For the first time, Ethan saw something other than fear in them. Trust. Just a flicker, but it was there. He carefully lifted the wolf and carried it inside. The cabin was warm, the scent of pine wood and old books filling the air. He laid the wolf on a thick blanket near the hearth and quickly set to work, cleaning the wound properly and bandaging the leg. The wolf let out a low rumble but did not lash out. "You're safe now," Ethan whispered, watching as exhaustion overtook the animal. Outside, the sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the land. Their journey together had only just begun. The wolf's breathing was slow and steady now, though its golden eyes flickered open from time to time, watching Ethan as he moved about the cabin. It wasn't asleep, at least not fully. Instinct kept it alert, wary of this new environment. Ethan crouched beside the animal, checking the bandage around its leg. The bleeding had stopped, but the wound was deep, and infection was still a risk. He'd cleaned it as best as he could with antiseptic wipes, but without proper veterinary care, the wolf's survival still wasn't guaranteed. He sighed, running a hand through his short, dark hair. The nearest wildlife rescue center was miles away, and transporting a wild wolf in this condition was nearly impossible. Not to mention, there was no guarantee they would take it in. Many facilities were already overwhelmed, and an injured predator was not an easy patient. For now, the best option was to care for the wolf himself. Ethan stood and walked to the kitchen area, grabbing a clean bowl from the shelf. He filled it with water and set it on the floor near the wolf. The animal's ears twitched at the sound, and after a moment's hesitation, it lifted its head slightly and sniffed the air. "Go ahead," Ethan murmured, taking a step back to give it space. The wolf hesitated, then, with effort, stretched its neck forward and lapped at the water. Its movements were slow, but at least it was drinking. That was a good sign. Ethan watched for a moment before turning his attention to the wood stove in the corner of the cabin. The air had grown colder as the evening settled in, and though the fireplace provided some warmth, the stove would keep the space comfortably heated through the night. He added a few logs, listening as the flames crackled to life. The wolf's gaze followed him, but it didn't growl this time. "Guess we're stuck with each other for a while, huh?" Ethan said, leaning against the counter. "You don't seem thrilled about it, but trust me, I've had worse company." The wolf flicked an ear but gave no other reaction. Ethan smirked to himself and glanced at the old clock on the wall. It was getting late. He grabbed a spare blanket from the couch and tossed it over the worn-out armchair in the corner. He'd sleep there tonight, close enough to keep an eye on his injured guest, but far enough away to give it some space. He sat down, adjusting the blanket around his shoulders. The night outside was silent, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. The cabin's interior was dimly lit by the soft glow of the fire, casting flickering shadows across the wooden walls. His eyelids grew heavy, and he let his head rest against the back of the chair. Just before sleep took him, he thought he heard the softest of sounds, something between a sigh and a low whimper. The wolf was watching him. Then, silence. The following days settled into a strange routine. Ethan would wake before dawn, checking on the wolf first thing. The animal still couldn't put weight on its injured leg, but the swelling had gone down, and its appetite was returning. At first, it refused the food Ethan set out. Small portions of cooked meat, nothing too rich, but hunger eventually won over caution. By the third day, the wolf was eating regularly. By the fifth, it had started to test its leg, standing for short periods before resting again. It never let Ethan get too close, but the initial hostility had faded. No more growls or snapping jaws. Just quiet observation, a silent truce between man and beast. Ethan found himself talking to the wolf more often than he expected. Maybe it was just habit. He spent long stretches of time alone in the forest, and talking to himself wasn't uncommon. But something about the wolf made it different. It wasn't just an animal he had rescued. It was something else, a presence. A reminder of the wild, untamed world beyond human understanding. "You need a name," Ethan mused one evening as he sat near the fire, rubbing the tension from his shoulders. The wolf lay on its blanket, head resting on its paws, golden eyes half-lidded in the dim light. He considered a few names, rolling them over in his mind. Something strong, something fitting. "How about Ghost?" he said finally. The wolf didn't react. Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, all right. Not a fan. Fair enough." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The truth was, he didn't know how long the wolf would stay. It was healing, but it wouldn't be long before instinct urged it back to the wild. That was the way of things. Wild animals didn't stay with humans. But for now, they were here. Together. And that was enough. The first real sign of change came on the 7th day. Ethan was outside chopping firewood when he heard movement behind him. He turned, expecting to see a deer passing through the clearing. Instead, it was the wolf, watching him. It had ventured out of the cabin for the first time, its injured leg still weak, but supporting its weight. Its fur caught the golden light of the setting sun, making it look almost ethereal. Ethan lowered the axe slowly. "You're up," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Didn't think you'd come outside yet." The wolf took a hesitant step forward, testing the ground beneath its paws. Ethan remained still, letting it move at its own pace. The wolf circled the clearing once, sniffing at the crisp autumn air, then turned its gaze back to Ethan. Something passed between them. An understanding, unspoken, but undeniable. Then, with surprising ease, the wolf crossed the distance between them and sat down a few feet away. Ethan exhaled, a slow smile forming. "Guess you're not in a hurry to leave after all." The wolf blinked, silent. For the first time, Ethan felt certain. This wasn't just a temporary rescue. This was something more. A few more days passed, and with each one, the wolf grew stronger. His steps were firmer, his movements more confident. He left the hut more and more often, exploring the surroundings, but he always returned. Ethan knew that it would not last long. Soon the beast would be gone, and he was right. One cold morning, when hoarfrost covered the grass with a silvery patina, the wolf stood at the edge of the forest. He turned around for a moment, meeting the ranger's gaze, and disappeared between the trees. Ethan watched him in silence. He didn't try to call out to him, didn't step forward. It was an inevitable moment. But something in his chest still clenched. Life was back to normal. Days were once again filled with patrols, checking forest trails, watching for wildlife. Everything was going as it should. but he never forgot about the wolf. And then something happened that he hadn't expected. One night, when the forest was shrouded in silence, Ethan awoke to a strange sensation, as if someone was watching. He slowly sat up on the bed and listened. There was a slight noise outside, not threatening, not frightening, more like calling. He got up, threw on his jacket, and walked out the door. The forest lived its nightlife. The moon cast silvery reflections on the snow-covered ground, and between the shadows of the trees he saw a silhouette, a wolf. But he wasn't alone. There were two others standing nearby. One slightly smaller, with fluffy, thick fur. The other, probably young. His movements were abrupt, uncertain. Ethan froze, unable to believe his eyes. They had come. The wolf took a few steps forward and lowered his head, as if confirming it was no accident. He had not forgotten. He had returned, and with him, his pack. The ranger stood still, realizing that he had the honor of seeing something that few people get to see. The beast he had saved had not just survived. It had found its way home. In that moment, Ethan realized that wildlife gratitude cannot always be expressed in words or gestures. Sometimes it showed itself in a silent look, in the slight movement of a tail, in the very fact that it had returned. He watched as the wolves stood before him, not approaching, but not in a hurry to leave either. They gave him a chance to share this moment with them. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they vanished into the forest shadows. But the ranger knew. He was part of the story now, part of the pack.